This is Open Parley Live.
Hello and a warm welcome to Open Parley Live here on Open Parley. My name is Lynette Manzini. Thank you very much for joining us today. In today's conversation, we're talking about the electricity situation in Zimbabwe. Blackout blues in Zimbabwe, what's the solution? In today's program, I'm joined by Honorable Engineer Leslie Mangwa. He is the MP for Chinoi constituency and also the Energy and Mines Shadow Minister for the Citizens Coalition for Change. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lynette.
We've got lights on us right now, but the rest of the country is not too happy. I left home with no electricity. We've been experiencing long load shedding hours. You go to bed before the electricity comes back and you have to charge your gadgets, just put them on the wall with the hope that electricity is going to come. Maybe if you can talk to us about the current situation of electricity supply in Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Lynette. Our electricity situation, sadly so, is dire. Unfortunately, from the other side of the government, they described it as subdued. But from my side, I think we are beyond a crisis. The energy that we are producing vis-a-vis what is needed by the industry, what is needed by the consumers at home, we are getting far less than we need. This is not something that you attribute to a natural disaster or what's the impression they want to give that predominantly it's because of Kariba. This is man-made. This is because of lagging in our planning and implementation of our energy projects.
Okay, and when you talk about the numbers, maybe let's get into the numbers. You said that we're not producing what industry and domestic consumption requires. What are the numbers looking like? What does the industry and consumers require, and what is actually being produced?
Currently, according to Zimbabwe Power Company, we have an average demand of between 1,700 to about 1,800 megawatts. The pre-2000 seasons were around 2,200 megawatts. The supply, that's the demand.
Which means we had more, already showing us that there was more production if they were...
That's the demand. That's what we needed. Remember, industry is not yet at 100% utilization. And in terms of production, in the past, would consistently get our 960 coming from Wange, and we have the small thermals making their small contribution, and you would have Kariba giving you consistently between 500, but the installed capacity for Kariba was 720. So if you add that, you'd say roughly we're around that figure.
Okay, and so we have thermal power stations, and then we have the hydroelectric power station. Talk to us about those. What is the condition, and what are they currently supplying?
In terms of Wange, there is Wange 1 to 6. Wange 1 to 6 has an installed capacity of 960 megawatts. But what's dependable is another story. It's installed old, dilapidated, and unreliable. So of the 960, if we have a good day, you get 400 out of that. But many times there are tube leaks, there are problems to do with 1 to 6. In terms of 7 and 8 is the new upgrade that was done. The installed capacity there is 670 megawatts, of which 600 are available. The other 70 is basically for the internal needs to keep the equipment running there. So the 600, that one is dependable. And that one is almost always available, except a month in a year where they have to do their statutory maintenance. So that's basically what's carrying the nation in terms of in terms of thermal. The other three, the smaller thermals, your Harare, your Bulawayo, and Mnyati, have been decommissioned, mainly because they were now expensive to maintain, expensive to run, and basically the costs outweighed the benefits of having them running. They were very inefficient. Then in terms of Kariba, there was an upgrade that happened a few years back. We used to have 720. They added another 300, and we are around 300 or so. So we are around 1,050 megawatts from Kariba. But Kariba, by its nature, from the onset, Kariba complements Hwange. So Hwange is what we call our base load. So this is what we have 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, once everything is working. And Kariba is a peaking station. So ordinarily when you have your winter loads, which are higher than ordinary, or during those times that you call the morning peak or the evening peak, Kariba would be running ordinarily maybe running around 500 megawatts. Then when you have these peaks, it is ramped up so that it covers for the increase in usage that happens during that time. So that is ordinarily what Kariba stands for. So with the water crisis, where you would ordinarily get your 400, your 300, you would now get 200, they would ramp it up during the winter peak to maybe 400 or so. So ordinarily, every year they are given a water quota that they have. So depending on how they distribute the water, they may have a deficit and go so low to compensate for that. So this has been worsened to a certain extent by the drought that we have. But it should be looked in the context that the fact that we've upgraded means we need more water to get to the peak that we needed. So the upgrade has, in effect, to a certain extent, made us need more water than we would ordinarily need.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now I remember in Parliament, you raised the question around the deficit, between what is required and what is actually being produced is very little. And, I think you asked a question around why then we have these long periods of load shedding. What response did you get from the minister?
Yeah, the minister came with a statement. In his statement, there are a couple of things that he raised. The first one being that, let me start from my question. My question was ordinarily the gap between what is produced and our peak demand is in the region of 300, 400 megawatts. And that should not translate to the prolonged load shedding that we're having. Because ordinarily, in the morning and in the evening, that's when you have the peak. So if your production is constant, it means that as the demand gets lower, the gap is narrowed. So the minister referred to the fact that there are laws that are exempted from load shedding, those that have dedicated feeds in the form of your hospital, your critical loads. They take a chunk out of what is being produced. Secondly, there was mentioned that there are exports that have been happening, exports to Zambia in the form of solidarity, and exports, I think, to another mine in Zambia. Something that I haven't corroborated, but it's something that the minister alluded to. So there is a crisis. As you rightly put it, the gripping load shedding looks much worse than it should with the difference that we see. We even probed that during winter, where you ordinarily have your loads being higher, you have your winter crop winter cropping, having dedicated power to, the situation was a little bit better than what we had a few days in November. So yeah, that is the story.
That's the story. And do we have any business as a country exporting electricity when we are having this challenge? I know you said, the minister said, they're doing it in solidarity. But in your view as the shadow minister, do you think we have any business?
I think there are two things here. You can't say we only import and we can't export, because electricity by its nature, as you produce it, you have to spend it. So in the long term, electricity operates the same way that you do with the stock exchange. That maybe ordinarily between 2 and 3 in the morning, you have excess, because what you produce, though it's less when you are at the peaks, off peak, it's more than what you need. So you have a relationship, because you have nowhere to store the electricity. If you don't export it, you just lose it. So over time, we have our Southern African power pool. So this relationship is always there, where we export and import. But I am not privy, being not part of the executive, I'm not privy to all the export and import deals that are there.
Mm-hmm. So in case you're just joining us, you are tuned into Open Pali Live here on Open Pali. My name is Lynette Manzini, and I'm joined by Honorable Engineer Leslie Mangwa. He is the CCC Member of Parliament for Chinoi constituency and the Shadow Minister for Energy and Mines. And he's talking to us about the current blackouts in Zimbabwe, the blackout blues in Zimbabwe, and he's going to be talking to us about the solutions. Thank you very much, Engineer, for walking us through, what happens, the numbers that we need, what's actually being produced. But you are in the opposition. You are the Shadow Minister. If you were to, get into power today and you are the minister, where would you start? Because you said that I saw an opinion piece that you penned, and you said the current regime has no political will. Even you spoke about the terminology that they use during the State of the Nation address. What would be your first port of call in addressing this energy crisis?
Energy is a global commodity. The business of government primarily is not to be the one building these power stations. The primary responsibility is to make an environment to make it lucrative for investors. I was at a conference recently where one delegate, potential sponsor, said, money is like water. It looks for the easiest path. So the most important thing is there are a lot of legislative hurdles. I'll give case in point. We have independent power producers that are coming. The independent power producers, they have to put in their money. Most of it, they get it externally in US dollar. And they're supposed to sell their electricity to ZTTDC, which is the subsidiary of ZESA, that transmits and sells electricity to us in ZIG. There is no predictability. The convertibility of the ZIG is something that's not stable. And somebody is looking to invest for the next 20 years. The break-even point is maybe at year 8. So the first thing is Zimbabwe is not short of planning. If we have an integrated energy resource plan that speaks to the resources that we have, that speaks to what we can explore and give us the cheapest costs of electricity. Case in point, God has blessed us so much with thermal, though the discussion with environmentalists speaks of us abandoning all our coal. Personally, I think there is still scope for coal in the next 30 years. We can have an ambitious plan to say by 2060, we should have 40% being the non-renewables, 60% being renewable. But still it means Zimbabwe can still have one thermal power plant, maybe 1,000 megawatts. We have one in Chiredzi or Kokwe there, where we have vast deposits. You have Lupane, where you have your gas in abundance. You have nuclear potential. So basically the issue is government should float expressions of interest, capital, foreign capital out there that gives us, that is prepared to invest and give us the least costs for electricity. We have to move away from opaque deals because at times the ultimate cost breakdown, the cost build-up of electricity when the market is not open becomes very huge and it kills industry. So the first thing, that's the first thing. The second thing, already people have embraced solar, and there's a concept called net metering, where when you are not using your electricity, excess electricity is fed back to the grid. This has been embraced by ZESA, but if you ask people around, very few people know about this. This is something that has been made a bridge too far, and there are no incentives for this. The third thing is the biggest power station that we can build in the short term is conserving the electricity that we already have. Energy efficiency. We should be incentivizing energy efficient buildings. We should be having our green building codes. We should be having a conversation where in public buildings, buildings owned by government, we lead from the front and we go for energy efficient lighting. Wherever we can put natural lighting, where we go and do cogeneration, where you use your heat pumps, where you use your solar, you get to show the potential that we have. I think basically with such measures, you look at your training. There is so much that has come with new professions that are linked to energy efficiency, that are linked to renewable energy, streamlining our higher education to talk to these. So we have an integrated approach that makes Zimbabwe energy secure. You have your short-term plans, you have your medium-term plans, and your long-term plans.
Okay, so you are ready for this ministry. If we were to come today, I hear from you, from all the solutions that you have given to us. But I want to go back to the issue.
I'm part of a collective.
Yes, part of the collective. Yes, not on your own.
Myself.
Yes, yeah. I do understand. I want to talk about the continued use of coal. You say if your party were to win, this is the direction that you would take, to say you still have a lifeline of using coal for the next 30 years. But then, like you rightfully mentioned, the climate justice activists are saying we should do away with coal. Why do you think you still have 30 years when in fact we are the biggest losers, as in African countries? We are the ones at the receiving end of, the climate disasters caused by, the continued use of coal.
Okay, that's a very good question. I believe in all this, there is need to have a healthy energy mix that takes into consideration the concerns that are there, the environmental concerns that are there. But for your own information, Africa combined, we only contribute 4% to the global emissions, of which Zimbabwe contributes less than 1% of the 4%. So in the global scale, we have to advocate for what we call just transition. The global north developed for 2 centuries using coal, which is a cheaper source of energy, a reliable source of energy. If you go to your solar today, you have it from maybe for 6 hours a day. If you put batteries, the cost gets higher. And the environmentalists never talk about what happens when the solar panels need to be thrown away in 20 to 30 years. That's a bigger global challenge than the coal that we're talking about, in terms of if we look at it from a Zimbabwean perspective.
I'm already thinking of the solar farms I've seen in different countries.
Yes. How do we dispose of them? That is worse than nuclear. We have nuclear, which is a very safe, very reliable, source of energy that we can put into the mix. The journey is not an easy one because the regulation is very stiff and not controlled locally. There are international protocols to be satisfied, etc. That again would come and bring the renewable side of things. But the combined mix of thermal, which we are saying, we progress with thermal, but cognizant of the fact that where we put 1,000 megawatts of thermal, we may also put 2,000 megawatts of renewable because we need that balance. Interestingly, when there was a serious bite, Germany, they had to bring down a wind farm to access the coal that was underneath.
Was it during the Ukraine-Russia war?
Yes. Yeah. It speaks volumes of each energy source as its advantages and disadvantages. We shouldn't do knee-jerk reactions. We shouldn't be reactive. In our process, curiously, South Africa, when it had a biting energy crisis, Kusile and Medupi were built. Those are thermal power plants. The conversation should not be led by environmentalists. It should be led by industry and energy leaders so that we have a balanced outcome.
Some would say industry leaders are capitalists and are in it for the profit and not for the health of, the environment and individuals, but it's a story for another day. I'd like us to move to the point where you said that, okay, so you're saying we need to have a healthy energy mix. I'm going to take that term from you. You spoke about the issue around use of solar as part of the energy mix. But is that not an elitist solution? We're looking at a high unemployment rate in Zimbabwe right now. And, the economy is on its knees. People are living from hand to mouth. The number of people on the streets in the informal sector. How many of these can afford the use of solar?
Already you've gone where the trajectory that I don't advocate for, where you are left to your own means, where it's the responsibility of the person at home to make themselves energy secure. There is need for government to take up the responsibility to give energy. When I'm talking of solar, I'm not talking about the domestic household solar.
Okay.
I'm talking about your concentrated solar plants, your solar farms, like the Gwanda one, if you remember. I'm talking about the big solar plants that you would put or floating solar panels over Kariba or Zambezi. This is what I'm referring to as solar being one of the sources of energy. And for your own information, even the poorest in the villages, a government-led program that installs the home solar kits is something that can alleviate energy poverty for those in the rural areas. I've been involved in South Africa in a program where we distributed almost 1 million of them, funded by the government, supported by the government, and this is a program. If you go to Rural Electrification Fund, the Rural Electrification Fund is doing some solar mini-grids. And these solar mini-grids are for rural areas. So it's not necessarily true that solar cannot help. As far as the person at home is concerned, as long as these efforts are coordinated from the utility perspective, the person doesn't know the source. You can't differentiate whether your electricity is from Wange or Kariba. All you get is your electricity.
Because it's just feeding into the same grid.
It's just feeding into the grid, yeah.
Okay. And then you spoke about buildings, and you said we need to have, you call them energy efficient buildings. Are you talking about building new? I know one of them maybe could be some. I've heard people talk about Eastgate Mall and saying that it brings in light, so they use less light or so, and even the issue around the cooling system. When you walk through the mall, it's very, very cool. Are we now saying the future, any building that that is going to be constructed, whether from the private sector or from the public sector, needs to be energy efficient?
Yes, precisely that's what I'm saying. We have a framework that incentivizes people going green, incentivizes people getting to be energy efficient. There's a target called net zero buildings. Buildings where the energy you use and the energy that you produce basically cancel out. And this is something that, you can give tax breaks, for instance. If you build a building that's net zero, you give tax breaks. In Europe, it's mandatory to think about the energy that you consume when you're building.
And have you seen this happening on the ground here in Zimbabwe?
There's nothing like that. It's voluntary. Individual architects, individual engineers that are involved in projects are taking up the old best practices, but there's no overarching legislation to make that mandatory or to incentivize that.
And I want us to go back to our independent power producers. How much are they producing? Are they contributing to the grid, to the supply? And their operating environment. You spoke about you spoke about, if your party were to win, when your party wins, that you would work on issues to do with the legislation. Talk to us about what they're currently producing right now.
There are a few categories of people that are producing power. The first one is those that are producing for their own use. A couple of mines are now producing for their own use. If you go to Triangle, they have always been producing their electricity from their molasses. You go to your green fuels, they produce their electricity. You go to, there's Nyangani, there are mini hydros that are there. In Wange there, I know there's some thermal power plants. But currently, what is going into the grid is 50 megawatts. That's what has already been constructed and has been commissioned and is going to the grid.
And you spoke about the issue of our currency. I mean, this is something that has been a sticking point for a long time. The Reserve Bank governor recently introduced the ZiG. That was in April. It has since depreciated. And you spoke about how these independent power producers use United States dollars to generate the power. But then when it comes to people paying for this, consumers paying for this power, they are paying in ZiG. Can you maybe give us an estimate of the losses that maybe are being faced if you are privy to this information?
I'm only an engineer.
You're only an engineer.
But the concept is, we have a good example. When the authorities insisted on ZiG, on the local currency, that was before ZiG then, on the fuel stations. Our fuel was scarce, we had long queues. And what has happened now? When it's sold in US dollars, the queues disappeared. This is the same model that I advocate for energy power producers. You can, if need be, we can then leave maybe public institutions, domestic users, but there's no justification for industry that's producing and selling in US dollars to pay in ZiG. There's no justification. It's even cheaper for industry to pay in US dollars than to pay in ZiG for electricity that you don't have in 16 hours. You go and buy fuel to put in your generator. The costs becomes double for production. So I think it's more efficient, it's cheaper for industry to just accept that US dollar is the mode of trade in terms of energy.
As we round up this program, Honorable, your final words to the viewers.
The final word is Zimbabwe has never had a problem with planning. If you go to ZESA, at one point I was an employee there, you see loads and loads of documents. Even in the 60s, 70s, there were a lot of energy sources. You talk of your Devil's Gorge, you talk of your many projects that have always been in the pipeline. You talk of your Senga project, you talk of your Bite Bridge Temau. They are none. It is none. And the Batoka Gorge, you name it, it's none. What is not there is the support from Treasury, the support from the government to make these things happen. There is no political will to get us out of the crisis that we are having. So I think that's, to the viewers, if we continue with this trajectory, aluta continue. We need to do things differently. Another interesting point that I shared yesterday in the budget is we had a graphite mine once upon a time in Karoile called Lynx Mine. Lynx Mine provides graphite. And nowadays, graphene, which is a product of graphite, is a better substance to make solar panels than the silicon, the crystalline silicon we're using. That mine was allowed to go under, and yet as a country, we have such a strategic resource. Lithium combined with graphene will make an industry we are going to be proud of as a country.
On that note, I'd like to thank you very much, Honorable, for joining us today and sharing your solutions to the energy crisis that we are facing in Zimbabwe. There you have it, viewers. That was Honorable Engineer Leslie Mangwa. He is the CCC MP for Chinoi constituency, and he was talking to us about the blackout blues in Zimbabwe and the possible solutions. He spoke about legislation that empowers independent power producers. He spoke about a healthy energy mix, the use of coal-generated powered electricity, and also solar-powered electricity, where the government needs to offer incentives. He also spoke about our infrastructure, the buildings. Whenever we're constructing new buildings, they should be energy efficient. And he says that as a country, we're not short of plans. The issue is the execution and the much needed support. He continues to bemoan the issue of political will from the government. That's it for today's program. Until next time, my name is Lynette Manzini. Goodbye.
This is Open Parley Live. This is Open Parley Live.